More than 3,000 years ago, in the heart of Persia, one of the most enigmatic and powerful religions in history was born, Zoroastrianism, a cult that worshipped light, sacred fire, and the balance between good and evil. But what secrets do the fire temples that still stand hide? Who was Zoroaster really? And how did his worldview influence entire empires? Today, we will travel to the oldest temples where the fire never goes out. We will explore ancient rituals and unravel the hidden mysteries of this fascinating religion. From Persian kings to the connection with ancient magicians, get ready to discover a world where fire is much more than just an element. So stay until the end, because what you're going to see today will change your perception of history forever. Welcome to the enigma of the fire temples and the wisdom of Zoroaster.
Temple of Fire. Fire burning in the Yazd-Atash Bahram Temple in Yazd, Iran. Fire temple in Zoroastrianism is the place of worship for its practitioners, often called Dar-Mer, Persian language, or Adhyari, Gujarati language. In Zoroastrian religion, fire, or atar, along with clean water or abas, are terms of ritual purity. The clean, white ash for purification ceremonies is considered the basis of ritual life, which are essentially the rites of a domestic fire, because the temple fire is the fire of fire raised to a new solemnity. For one who sacrifices to fire with fuel in his hand is given happiness. As of 2017, there were 50 fire temples in Mumbai, 100 in the rest of India, and 27 in the rest of the world. There is a religious custom in India of not allowing Zoroastrian women to enter the fire temple and the Tower of Silence if they marry a non-Zoroastrian. This custom has been challenged in the Supreme Court of India after a Zoroastrian woman was denied entry to these institutions. The Parsi Zoroastrian Jashan ceremony, blessing of a home. The earliest evidence is from the 9th century, where fire rituals are contemporary with the birth of Zoroastrianism itself. It appears at about the same time as the shrine cult and is roughly contemporary with the introduction of Atar as a divinity. There is no allusion to a fire temple in the Avesta proper, nor is there any word in the Old Persian language for one. That fire rituals were a doctrinal modification and absent from early Zoroastrianism is also evident in the later Atash Nyash. In the oldest passages of that liturgy, it is the fire of the hearth that speaks to all those for whom they cook the evening meal and the morning meal, which Boyce observes is not consistent with the sanctified fire. The temple is an even later development. From Herodotus, we know that by the mid-5th century BC, Zoroastrians were worshipping in the open sky, ascending mounds to light their fires. Strabo confirms this, noting that in the 6th century BC, the sanctuary of Zila in Cappadocia was an artificial mound, walled but open to the sky, although there is no evidence that the sanctuary at Zela was Zoroastrian. Fire burning was a key element in Zoroastrian cult, and the burning of eternal fire, like the presence of light in worship, was also a key element in many other religions. By the time of the Hellenistic Parthians, 250 BC, 226 AD, there were two places of worship in Zoroastrianism. One, called a Bagan or Ayazan, was a shrine dedicated to a specific divinity. It was built in honor of an individual or family's patron, or angel, and included an icon or effigy of the honored. The second, the Atroshan, were the places of burning fire which became increasingly prevalent as the iconoclastic movement gained support. Following the rise of the Sasanian dynasty, shrines to the Yazatas continued to exist, but with the statues, by law, abandoned or replaced by fire altars. Furthermore, as Shipman observed, there is no evidence, even during the Sasanian era, 226 to 650, that fires were ranked according to their sanctity. It seems likely that there were practically only two, namely the Atash-i-Varam, literally, victorious fire, and the smaller Atashi Adaran, a parish fire, so to speak, serving a quarter of a town or city. Apparently only in the Atashi Varam was the fire kept continuously burning, with the Adaran the fires being relit annually. While the fires themselves had special names, the structures did not, and it has been suggested that the prosaic nature of the Middle Persian names, Kadeg, man, and Xanag are all words for an ordinary house, perhaps reflects a desire on the part of those who fostered the temple cult to keep it as close as possible in character to the ancient hearth fire cult and to discourage its development. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, 636, and the Battle of Niven, 642, were instrumental in the collapse of the Sasanian Empire and state-sponsored Zoroastrianism. The destruction or conversion into mosques of some fire temples in Greater Iran followed. The faith was largely practiced by the aristocracy, but no large fire temples existed. Some fire temples continued for their original purpose, although many Zoroastrians fled. In recent times, several fire temples have been rebuilt in Iran, as Zoroastrianism is now tolerated. In 1978, a modern fire temple was built in Isfahan. An 8th century Tang dynasty clay figure of a Sogdian man with a distinctive hood and face veil, possibly a camel rider or even a Zoroastrian priest performing a ritual at a fire temple. Veils were worn to avoid contaminating the sacred fire with breath or saliva. Museum of Oriental Art, Turin. The oldest remains of what has been identified as a fire temple are those on Mount Tajan near Lake Haman in Sistan. Only traces of the foundations and ground plan survive and have been provisionally dated to the 3rd or 4th century BC. The temple was rebuilt during the Parthian period, 250 BC 226 AD, and expanded during Sasanian times, 226 to 650 AD. The characteristic feature of the Sasanian fire temple was its domed sanctuary where the fire altar stood. These types of sanctuary always had a square plan with a pillar at each corner supporting the dome. Archaeological remains and literary evidence from Zen's commentaries on the Avesta suggest that the sanctuary was surrounded by a domed shrine, passageway on all 4 sides. At a number of sites the dome, usually made of rubble masonry with stone quartz, is all that survives, so such ruins are popularly called fars, kahartak, or 4 arches. Temple ruins from the Sasanian period have been found in various parts of the former empire, mainly in the southwest, Fars, Kerman, and Elam. But the largest and most impressive are those at Adar Gushnasp in Media Minor. Many more ruins are popularly identified as the remains of Zoroastrian fire temples, even when their purpose is evidently secular in nature, or they are the remains of a temple of the sanctuary cults, or, as is the case with a strong fire temple and monastery at Sirkani, Azerbaijan, unambiguously belonging to another religion. The remains of a fire altar, most likely built during Yazdegerd-Hughes, reign 438 to 457, proselytizing campaign against the Christian Armenians, have been found directly beneath the temple. Main altar of the Ekmiadzin Cathedral, the seat of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Great legendary fires Eternal Flame at the Baku Fire Temple, also known as Hga of Baku. Apart from relatively minor fire temples, 3 are said to be derived directly from Ahura Mazda and are thus the most important in Zoroastrian tradition. These were the Great Fires or Royal Fires of Adar Burzanmir, Adar Farnbag, and Adar Gushnasp. The legends of the Great Fires are probably of antiquity, for by the 3rd century, miracles were said to occur at the site. and the fires were popularly associated with other legends, such as those of the folktale and its heroes Faradin, Jamshid, and Rostam. The Bundahishan, a collection of Zoroastrian cosmogony and cosmology texts written in the Pahlavi script that was completed in the 11th or 12th century, states that the great fires existed from creation to propagate faith, dispel doubts, and protect all of humanity. Other texts note that the great fires were also vehicles of propaganda and symbols of imperial sovereignty. The priests of these respective royal fires are said to have competed with each other to attract pilgrims by promoting the legends and miracles that supposedly occurred at their respective sites. Each of the three is said to have reflected social and feudal divisions. The fire that is Farnbag has made its place among the priests. The fire that is Gushnast has made its place among the warriors. The fire that is Burzan Mitro has made its place among the farmers. Denkard 6.293. These divisions, from an archaeological and sociological point of view, are revealing because they make clear that, from at least the 1st century BCE onwards, society was divided into 4, not 3, feudal estates. The Farnbag fire, translated as the fire given by glory by Dharmastiter, was considered the most revered of the 3 because it was seen as the earthly representative of the Atar Spanishta, the most holy fire of Yasna 17.11, and is described in a Zen commentary on that verse as burning in paradise in the presence of Ormuz. Panorama of the ruins in Tati Sulayman, Western Iran. Although in the eyes of contemporary Iranian Zoroastrian priests, the 3 fires did not really exist, fire temples rather belonging to the mythological realm, several attempts have been made to identify the locations of the great fires. In the early 20th century, A.V. Jackson identified the remains at Tak-e-Sulayman, halfway between Urmia and Hamadan, as the Temple of Adar Gushnasp. The location of the fire of Mithras, that of Burzan Mir, was identified with reasonable certainty by Jackson to be near the village of Mir, halfway between Mayandasht and Sabzivar, on the road from Khorasan to Nishapur. The Lesser Bundahishan, Hindu, records the Farnbag fire having been on the mountain, possessing glory in Khwarizm, but then moved over the shining mountain in the district of Kabul, as there it still remains. That the temple once stood in Khwarizm is also supported by the Greater Bundahishan and by the Zatsbaram texts. However, according to the Greater Bundahishan, Iranian, it moved over the shining mountain of Kavarvand in the district of Kar. The rest of the passage is identical to the Indian edition. Dharmastiter identified this. If this identification is correct, the Farnbag Fire Temple lies 10 miles southwest of Juwan, midway between Joram and Lar. Udvada Atash Biram in 2009, located in Gujarat. According to Parsi legend, when a group of refugees from Greater Khorasan landed in western Gujarat over 1,000 years ago, they had the ashes of this fire with them. It is said that this ash served as the bed for the fire in Udvada today. This fire temple was not always in Udvada. According to Kissa-i Sanjan, History of Sanjan, the only extant account of the early years of the Zoroastrian refugees in India, and composed at least 6 centuries after their arrival, the migrants established an Atash Warharan, victorious fire, in Sanjan, a town near Gujarat. Under threat of war, probably in 1465, the fire was moved to the Bharat Caves 20 kilometers south of Sanjan, where it remained for 12 years.
Dear time travelers and lovers of eternal stories, I am Messalina, and I have a little secret for you. The gods reward those who support their favorite storytellers. If this corner of myths, legends, and mysteries has sparked your curiosity, I invite you to follow my channel and activate the bell so you don't miss a single trip through time. And if you want this legacy to grow and continue exploring together the greatness of Rome and beyond, you can leave your offering on PayPal or Patreon. The links are in the description, because even the gods know that any help allows for the forging of eternal works. I promise you that if you do, the gods will bring you peace, prosperity, and perhaps a little touch of fate. Your gestures do not go unnoticed, and my gratitude will be as infinite as time itself.
From there, it was moved to Bansta, where it remained for another 14 years before being moved once more to Navsari, where it remained until the 18th century. It was then moved to Advaita, silver coin of Yazdigar II, with a fire altar and 2 priests or attendants. Although there are numerous eternally burning Zoroastrian fires, with the exception of the War Heron fire, none of them is older than 250 years. The legend that Indian Zoroastrians invented the Afrinigan, the metal urn in which the sacred fire is kept today, when they moved the fire from Sanjan to the Barak caves, is untenable. Greek historians of the Parthian period reported the use of a metal urn as a vase to carry the fire. Sasanian coins of the 3rd–4th centuries also reveal a fire in a vase-like vessel, identical in design to today's Afrinigans. However, Indian Zoroastrians export these and other utensils to their coreligionists around the world. One of the most common technical terms in use for a Zoroastrian fire temple is Dar-bi-Mer, romanized as Dar-bi-Mer. The etymology of this term, meaning Gate of Mithras or Court of Mithras, is problematic. It has been proposed that the term is a throwback to the age of sanctuary cults, the name being retained because all major Zoroastrian rituals were solemnized between dawn and noon, the time of day especially under the protection of Mithras. Etymological theories see a derivation from Mithrayana, so Milet, or Mithradana, Gershevich, or Mithraean, Wilkin. Furthermore, it is unclear whether the term refers to a consecrated inner sanctuary or to the ritual enclosure. Among present-day Iranian Zoroastrians, the term Dar-bi-Mer includes the entire ritual precinct. It is significantly more common than the older Atash-Kada, a classical Persian language term, which along with its Middle Persian predecessors, Atash-Kadeh, man, and Xanad, literally means house of fire. The older terms have the advantage that they are easily understood even by non-Zoroastrian Iranians. In the early 20th century, the Zoroastrian calendar-based Bombay Facilis revived the term as the name of its first fire temple, and later in that century, the Zoroastrians of Tehran adopted it for the name of their main fire temple. The term Dar-bi-Mer is also common in India, though with a slightly different meaning. Until the 17th century, the fire, now at Advaita, was the only one that burned continuously in the Indian subcontinent. Each of the other settlements had a small building in which rituals were performed, and the fire from which the priests rekindled whenever necessary from embers carried from their own fires. The Parsis called this unconsecrated building Dar-bi-Mer or agiary. The latter is the Gujarati word for firehouse, and thus a literal translation of Ashkada. In recent years, the term Dar-bi-Mer has come to refer to a secondary sacred fire for daily ritual use that is present in the most prestigious fire temples. Abroad, particularly in North America, Zoroastrians use the term Dar-bi-Mer both for temples that have a fire that burns eternally and for sites where the fire is lit only on special occasions. This is largely due to the financial support of such places by one Arbab, Rustam Gul, who preferred the Iranian dialectical form. Functionally, fire temples are built to honor the fire within them, and fire temples are classified and named according to the grade of fire found within them. There are 3 grades of fires: the Atash Daga, Atash Adaran, and Atash Baram. The Atash Daga is the lowest grade of sacred fire and may be consecrated over the course of a few hours by 2 priests, who alternately recite the 72 verses of the Yasna liturgy. The consecration may occasionally include the recitation of Vendidat, but this is optional. A layman may tend the fire when no services are in progress. The term is not necessarily a consecrated fire and also applies to the hearth fire or the oil lamp found in many Zoroastrian homes. The next highest degree of fire is the Atash Adaran, the fire of fires. It requires a gathering of representatives of the 4 professional groups with feudal estates, of a hearth fire of the Esrone, priests, the Bara, Ashtara, soldiers, and officials, the Vasterioship, farmers and shepherds, and the Hutakshi, artisans and workers. 8 priests are required to consecrate an Adaran fire, and the procedure takes 2 to 3 weeks. The Yazd Atash Beram and Atash Beram. Fire of Victory is the highest grade of fire that can be placed in a Zoroastrian fire temple. The establishment and consecration of this fire is the most elaborate of all the grades of fire. It involves the gathering of 16 different types of fire, including the fire from a cremation pyre, the fire from offices where an oven is located, and the fires from hearths, as is also the case with the Atash Adaran. Each of the 16 fires is subject to a purification ritual before being joined with the others. 32 priests are required for the consecration ceremony, which can take up to a year to complete. Types of fire. Fire used in burning a corpse. Fire used by a dyer fire from a house of a king or a ruling authority. Potter's fire, brickmaker's fire. Fire of an ascetic fire, of a goldsmith fire of a mint. Blacksmith's fire, gunsmith's fire, baker's fire. A brewer's fire, a soldier's fire. A shepherd's fire. Fire produced by atmospheric lightning fire of the house of any Zoroastrian. A temple that maintains an Adaran or Beram fire also maintains at least 1 deck of fire. In contrast to the Adaran and Beram fires, the deck of fire is the one at which the priests perform the rituals of the faith, and to which the public turns to invoke blessings for a specific individual, family, or event. The veneration of the major fires is directed solely to the fire itself, that is, after the consecration of such a fire, the Atash Nyashas, the Litany of Fire in modern Avestan, is recited before it. List of 9 Atash Berams. Aransha Atash Beram in Udvada, India. Established in 1742. Desai Atash Beram in Navsari, India. Established in 1765. Dadaseth Atash Beram in Mumbai, India. Established in 1783. Vaikil Atash Beram in Surat, India. Established in 1823. Modi Atash Beram in Surat, India. Established in 1823. Wadia Atash Beram in Mumbai, India. Established 1830. Banaji Atash Beram in Mumbai, India. Established in 1845. Anjuman Atash Beram in Mumbai, India. Established in 1897. Yazd Atash Beram in Yazd, Iran. Established in 1934. Temple structure. The entrance of a Mumbai fire temple, showing a lamasu. A view of the Atashgag, Iran, fire temple structure on the hilltop. The exterior facade of a Zoroastrian fire temple is almost always intentionally nondescript and unadorned. This may reflect an ancient tradition, sustained by the prosaic nature of the technical terms for a fire temple, where the primary purpose of a fire temple is to house a sacred fire and not to glorify what would otherwise be simply a building. The basic structure of today's fire temples is always the same. There are no indigenous sources older than those in the 19th century that describe an Iranian fire temple. The 9th century theologian Manishur noted that they had a standard floor plan, but where exactly that was is unknown, and it is possible that temples there today have features that are of Indian origin. Upon entering, one passes through a large space or hall where congregations, also non-religious or special ceremonies may take place. Adjacent to this, or sometimes on a floor level above or below, the worshipper enters a smaller anteroom. Connected to this anteroom, or within it, but not visible from the hall, is the innermost sanctuary, in Zoroastrian terminology, atasha, literally place of fire, in which the actual fire altar is located. A temple in which a yasna service, the principal Zoroastrian act of worship accompanying the recitation of the yasna liturgy, may be held will always have, attached to it or on its grounds, at least one well or stream or other natural water source. This is a critical requirement for Abzor, the culminating rite of the yasna service. Only priests attached to a fire temple may enter the innermost sanctum, which is enclosed on at least one side and has a double vaulted roof. The double dome has vents to allow smoke to escape, but the vents in the outer dome are offset from those in the inner dome, thereby preventing dirt or rain from entering the sanctum sanctorum. The sanctum is separated from the antechamber by dividers or walls with very large openings and is slightly elevated from the surrounding space. The walls of the sanctum sanctorum are almost always tiled or marbled, but otherwise undecorated. There are no lights, apart from the fire itself, in the inner sanctum. In the Indo-Zoroastrian tradition, which is not evident in recent buildings, are designed in such a way that direct sunlight does not enter the sanctuary. In one corner hangs a bell, which is rung 5 times a day at the board, literally, good fragrance ceremony, marking the beginning of each ga, or watching. The tools for maintaining the fire, which is always fueled with wood, are simply hung on the wall, or as sometimes happens, stored in a small room that can be accessed through the sacred place. In India and in Indo-Zoroastrian communities abroad, non-Zoroastrians are strictly forbidden to enter any space from which the fires can be seen. While this is not a doctrinal requirement, that is, it is not a mandate specified in the Avesta or the so-called Pahlavi texts, it has nonetheless developed as a tradition. It is, however, mentioned in a 16th century epistle of Rivayat. Furthermore, entry to any part of the facility is sometimes reserved solely for Zoroastrians. This precludes the use of the temple hall for public, even secular, functions. Zoroastrians insist, however, that these restrictions are not intended to offend non-Zoroastrians, and point to similar practices in other religions. A Dorian fire temple in Tehran. When the adherent enters the antechamber before a sanctum sanctorum, he or she will offer dried sandalwood or other sweet-smelling wood to the fire. This is in accordance with the doctrinal statutes expressed in Vendidat, which, in addition to listing which fuels are appropriate, also reiterates the commandments of Yasna 3.1 and Yashts 14.55, which describe which fuels are not, in particular wood. In the current Zoroastrian tradition, the offering is never made directly, but is placed under the care of the celebrating priest who, wearing a cloth mask over his nostrils and mouth to prevent contamination of breath, uses a pair of silver tongs and places the offering into the fire. The priest will use a special ladle to offer the sacred ash to the layman, who will then apply it to his forehead and eyelids, and may take some home to use later in a kushti ceremony. A Zoroastrian priest does not preach or hold sermons, but simply tends to the fire. Attendance at the fire temple is particularly high during seasonal celebrations, and especially for the New Year Nowruz.
Fire temples have stood the test of time, keeping flames burning for thousands of years alive. They are more than just buildings, they are symbols of a belief that shaped empires, influenced religions, and lives on today. Zoroaster taught that the world is a constant battle between light and darkness, good and evil, and that each of us has the power to tip the balance. His teachings transcended centuries, influencing everything from the Persia of the Achaemenid kings to modern thought. But now the question is for you. What do you think about these temples and their meaning? Do you think the sacred fire still has a power beyond the earthly? Leave it in the comments, because your opinion is also part of history. If you enjoyed this journey through time, give it a like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any more hidden stories from the past. See you in the next video, and remember that knowledge is the true flame that should never be extinguished.